I personally believe that everyone who comes into my life is sent by God. I need to be attentive to what they're doing, what they're saying to me, what I can learn from them. So I have to be attentive to them. I have to be a good listener. I can't be completing their sentences, and I can't be interrupting them.
Hello, and welcome back to Religion to Reality, the podcast about living an integrated life. I'm your host, Dave Plisky, and am joined by my friend and co-host, Father John Gribowich. This season is all about listening. And for us as Catholics, we're trying to go outside the church and listen to voices from across faith spectrums. And just last episode, we heard from Anju Bhargava about what it means to be a Hindu, and particularly a Hindu in America, and as someone who is engaged in interfaith dialogue and all that good stuff. That would be a good episode to listen to before we get into this one, where we're going to be joined by a Catholic who does interfaith dialogue and is a scholar of Hinduism and has taught on it and written many books and articles about it. Without further ado, let's hear from Professor Bradley Malkovsky. Today, we are joined by Bradley Malkovsky. Brad is a professor of theology at the University of Notre Dame and an internationally respected scholar of comparative theology and interreligious dialogue. His work focuses on the doctrinal and spiritual relationship between Christianity and other religions, particularly the Hindu-Christian encounter. He has taught at Notre Dame since 1992 after years of study and research in both Germany and India. Dr. Malkovsky earned advanced degrees from the University of Tübingen and studied Sanskrit and Hindu thought at the University of Pune in Pune, India. He previously served as editor of the Journal of Hindu Christian Studies and is widely recognized for his contributions to comparative spirituality, comparative theology, and interfaith understanding. He is the author of several influential works, including God's Other Children, Personal Encounters with Faith, Love, and Holiness in Sacred India, which won the Houston Smith Publishing Prize. Drawing from years of lived experience in India, the book explores encounters with Hindu, Buddhist, and Muslim communities and reflects on the deeper spiritual questions that emerge through interreligious engagement. Brad, it's really great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. Well, we'd love to start with you where we start with many of our guests, which is just to learn more about you, and kind of what your path was. I'd love to kind of let our listeners hear about your journey, especially your spiritual journey, and how it led to all these different encounters with these other faiths.
Yeah. This could take a while. I'll try to give you the shortened version. I'm from upstate New York, actually, Ithaca, New York. I come from a family that has no academic connections at all. Parents were factory workers. And I was raised without religion and raised without spirituality. But in high school, I came to the conclusion that life has no meaning at all if the meaning of life is basically to follow the normal goal of just getting ahead financially in terms of, I guess, special honor, you might say. And so what I ended up doing was deciding not to go to college after all. I decided that I have to go out into the world to see what it might teach me. And so I left home at the age of 18. After my 6 months probation was over for getting a driver's license, you can drive out of state. And I drove to Arizona only because it was a warmer climate than upstate New York. And I intended to come back after just a few months. And I ended up living in the Southwest for 3 years. And that began the journey really to other religions, because what happened when I was living in the Southwest is I became baptized. I was raised without religion, as I said, and I was baptized into the Catholic Church. And eventually I decided to make a 1-week retreat in New Mexico at a Benedictine monastery, Christ in the Desert. And what surprised me there was that the few monks that were living there were only 5 people living there at the time. They decided they wanted to engage in hearing recordings of other religions from a year earlier at a different monastery, where they talk about what is their spirituality about, Hindu, Buddhist, Muslim, etc. And I was kind of shocked by the whole idea that these other religions could have something to offer a Christian. And nothing was explained to me about how this might theologically fit into a Christian view of the world. And so I knew I had to explore this somehow. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I believe very strongly in divine providence. I think God led me into the monastery, but also led me out again about a year later. This was supposed to be a 2-week visit, but it lasted almost a whole year. And so from there, I went on to St. John's University in Minnesota, 2 years of philosophy, ran out of money, went to Germany for what I thought was going to be 1 semester, lived there 8 years, studying mostly theology there, mostly Catholic, but also Protestant. I was research aide to Walter Kasper, who's now a cardinal, of course. And from there, I went to India finally to learn more about Hinduism and other religions, but especially Hinduism. I thought I was going to go for 1 year on a research scholarship, but I ended up living there 5 years because I got married to a woman who'd been raised in Islam. We had our first 2 children there. And finally, after a number of years, I returned to the United States, got a job teaching at St. John's in Minnesota, and then I made my way to Tübingen, and the rest is history. So
Wow.
I learned a lot of unexpected things along the way. I did not expect to explore other religions. And I really strongly believe that it was divine providence that forced me out of a mindset that was very resistant to learning about other religions, to see firsthand what they're like, and to be pleasantly surprised by the goodness and holiness of other people of other religions.
It's interesting to me that you, uh, in Arizona, you were open enough to another religion. At the time, you had none, so Christianity was another religion. But then within a few short years, you were already like, no, I'm not. I'm once again not necessarily open to another like. So I'm just curious, like, what happened in Arizona that,
Yeah, sorry.
and then also like, what do you think changed in you that did kind of start to open you back up again?
I realized that something was missing from my life, and I was very unhappy with modern materialistic culture. And like so many other people of my generation who converted to Catholicism, it was especially due to Thomas Merton. So I read The Seven-Story Mountain. It really spoke to me. And I thought, well, this is a community of love, and Jesus is central to it. I knew next to nothing about Jesus at the time. And I felt this is what I need. I need something like this. It was not like I made a decision, this has to be the best of all religions, but it was the religion for me. So at the time I was working as a dishwasher, 84 hours a week. That's another story. And I read as much as I could on the side. And so the more I read, the more I realized this is the place I want to be. I didn't know at the time, of course, about all of the different conflicts that occur in various religions, not just between religions, but but the fact is it was a good move for me to find myself rooted in God in a way that I had not been before. And like I said, I was not at all interested in learning about other religions. I did not know at the time that Thomas Merton was so important for the engagement with other religions. I learned all of that many years later, and I learned to value it. The big surprise, I think, again, was to attend to those recordings in the monastery of Christ in the Desert in New Mexico, and have my mind forced open to recognize there's something here that I need to study, because there's joy in those other speakers of other religions. They're speaking with confidence about what they know. So I didn't know what to do with that theologically speaking. So I had to begin somewhere, and I started by heading off to college to study philosophy, which was kind of a dead end for these kinds of questions, I think. It can be helpful, but I needed theology more than I needed philosophy.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's really profound. You know, there's lots of points of intersection with your journey and mine in some ways. I mean, spending time in a monastery, it was a very big part of my spiritual awakening. And Christ in the Desert, I've been there. It's such a beautiful place. I know it was probably a lot more stark, even maybe when you were there.
I
But
was there. I was there in 1973.
Wow. So that's kind of at the the
Yeah,
early days.
yeah.
And of course, Merton visited there in 68. But
Twice.
yeah, that's really, really cool.
Yeah.
Um, wow. So let's talk about just this whole desire for contemplation. Would you say that was something that really intrigued you, like what a monk means by contemplation, what a life of contemplation looks like? Is that something that was very resonating with you?
At that time, not really. All I
Okay.
knew, I've always loved silence. That's
Hmm.
the way I've always been. And I knew that by going to this remote monastery, I'd be getting away from modern American life. And I did not understand at the time just how intense that solitude and silence could be and how wonderful and nurturing it could be. So I guess I was learning as I got there. I didn't Merton had already spoken about that, but I had not really understood what he meant by that. I just the whole idea of silence and solitude resonated with me. I didn't even know the word contemplation till I read
Hmm.
Merton. I still didn't know what it meant at the time. Of
Hmm.
course, once I got there and we're praying 5 times a day in the church and all of that, and I started to understand um, traditional Catholic understanding of contemplation, things like that.
Yeah.
How has your understanding of contemplation changed as you've started to encounter all these other faith traditions?
I see commonalities that I did not expect. Um, the understanding, using the language of Merton and using the language of Bede Griffiths, who's my real mentor from India, is we have to pass beyond ego to attain an inner sanctum of silence, where where that state of awareness, which is changeless and pure consciousness, you might say, is really more who we are than our own everyday body or everyday mind and the body that we identify with. So the need to pass beyond the world of the senses, the world of multiplicity, to go deeply within and to awaken to something that you did not expect is something I think that all these different religions know in their own way on their own paths, using different vocabulary, of course. There's a great convergence that's there. Now, having said that, I also recognize there are huge differences as well in the possibility of experience of the divine. So what I'm talking about is going within to that inner sanctum of silence. That can be non-relational. And you find that often enough in Hinduism and Buddhism. But you also know, anybody who knows a little bit about world religions knows also that there's this interpersonal relationship with God is also possible, not only in Christianity, but in other religions as well. One of the big mistakes I made about Hinduism when I first went there, I basically assumed that everybody's meditating in India, who's a Hindu. But it turns out they're praying more than they're meditating. They don't have a lot of time to do meditation. And not everybody has a very profound understanding of their own religion anyway, that they would know a lot about the various possibilities within their own faith tradition. It's kind of a wandering answer. Sorry about that.
No, it's actually kind of perfect because I was going to try to get us into Hinduism anyway. So now you take us there because I know that's well, I'll just tell our listeners that I have not had more correspondence before the actual interview than with you. And you were being very careful about the things you wanted to treat. You shared a whole bunch of your work with me, which I appreciated. And maybe a good place to start is you wrote I guess it's a chapter, or I don't know exactly what it was, but it was a great treatment of what Nostra Aetate means for Catholics' relationship with Hindus, and I guess I wanted to start there because that's kind of how I set up this entire season of the podcast, which is to say, look, the church since Vatican II has been trying to take a posture of being a listener, being in dialogue with other faith traditions in a way that it really never had before. And I just wanted to see if you could unpack that a little bit for us, the
Yeah.
significance of the time that we're in and what it means.
Yeah, I teach Nostra Aetate. I've taught it every semester for 33 years now at Notre Dame. And things have changed from the time I first taught it in 1992. in 1992, my Catholic students, and that's the majority of my students at Notre Dame, they were very skeptical that anything valuable can be learned from other religions. And they were utterly surprised to hear that the Nostra Aetate recognizes the great importance of those other religions, that holiness is possible in other religions, and that we share so much. And nowadays, I should add also that there were a number of my students back in the day who were already open to other religions, but they thought that they were going against the Catholic Church's teaching. They didn't know about Nostra Aetate at all. They'd never learned about it in Catholic high school. So I call Nostra Aetate the best kept secret of the Catholic Church, because the word even today is still not got out enough for people in general, especially for younger people. Although I've discovered in recent years that more and more of my students actually have read Nostra Aetate in Catholic high school. So things are a lot different now than they used to be when I first started teaching there. So again, Nostra Aetate is looking for commonalities, what we can do as members of different religions to work together to make this a better world. And they recognize that the providence of God is available everywhere to all people, regardless of whether you're a Christian or not. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned about the relationship of Catholicism to other religions and what our attitude should be. It should be one of openness and exploring. I guess that's the thing that most confirmed my own experience, that I learned from my own experience all that is good and inspiring in other religions. And I read in Nostra Aetate that those religions are indeed worth investigating. So, and this is a complete turnabout regarding Hinduism, for example. Until Nostra Aetate came along in 1965, there really wasn't anything positive that was said on the official level by official Catholic teaching. And now suddenly we have this shift going on where Hinduism is the first religion that's named in the document. Of course, the document was originally supposed to be about Judaism, but Nostra Aetate approaches the religions historically, and the oldest religion or collection of religions is Hinduism, so they start there. And they have nothing but good things to say about Hinduism. They don't touch on controversial issues like the caste system or the negative impact of colonialism in India through Catholic engagement. That's left out. They're looking for commonalities. And my students really like that we recognize that not only commonalities, that we can even learn from each other. Although that is not emphasized, I think, enough in Nostra Aetate, that we can learn from the other. It's more about where our ideas, our teachings, our spiritualities might converge to some degree. I'm very interested in learning what those other religions offer us, that it's something new that is not even mentioned at all in Nostra Aetate.
Or maybe even mentioned in our faith tradition.
I'm sorry, what?
Or those ideas that may not even be mentioned inside the Christian tradition.
Yes, that is so true. That is so true. The more you learn about other religions in relation to your own, the more you see things that you never would have imagined before, that they're there. There are also, of course, many teachings. We don't have to get into that, but there are doctrinal conflicts between Christianity and other religions that are absolutely crucial. Questions about reincarnation, for example. But on the other hand, the main thing, I guess, that we learn from Nostra Aetate is that we are one human family, and each of our religions is following its own path to holiness. And Nostra Aetate doesn't go so far as to say that other religions are founded on revelation, but that is something that's more and more being considered today, I think, by theologians, that we have to say that this great wisdom, these traditions are not founded simply on human searching, but on God's disclosures as well. So we have to somehow use the word revelation for them too, even though the problem here is that how can we have these conflicts of doctrine if these religions are founded on revelation from the one divine source? That's a different topic altogether.
Yeah, but it's a really important one. I can imagine that you probably spent much of your work trying to navigate through that. But let's just first start with, like, how have you benefited personally from your exploration of other religions? And maybe I guess the one part we kind of glossed over in your story is how did you land on Catholicism in the first place? Like what was I know you said Merton. Was that
Yeah.
it, or was there something else there?
Well, I didn't know anything about Catholicism. Merton spoke to me. If he had been from a different Christian church, that would have been the one for me. But also, what happened was at the time I was reading Merton as a 19-year-old in Phoenix, Arizona. Like I said, I was a dishwasher. And the other young people who were working in the restaurant were Catholic. And they said, well, why don't you come to a Sunday night folk mass? And I didn't
Hmm.
know anything what that meant.
Hmm.
I went there and I met this wonderful priest who was very kind and just a really great, powerful, dynamic presence who really understood my emptiness and longing to find something greater than what I could find through my own thinking.
Hmm.
So and so I started attending mass, not really understanding a whole lot about it. But I think if I hadn't got that push from the other young people at the restaurant, I probably would have taken a lot longer to actually set foot inside of a Catholic church.
Hmm.
And Merton was
Hmm.
getting together with these other people that I happened to know. Yeah. Over time, of course, you start to recognize, especially when you're doing theological studies, you start to recognize the special strengths of Catholicism, you know. And one of them is its openness to other religions in modern times, which has kind of led the way, I think, for the most part, among the Christian churches of today. But its openness also to the findings of scientific research is quite important. Social justice teaching. Those three things I think are really important today for Catholics everywhere if they're aware of what their church is trying to get them to be involved in with regard to engagement with the world, you know. So yeah.
So then how has your
Oh,
exploration of
yeah,
other religions now kind of
yeah,
maybe informed your Catholicism, or how you look at things differently because of that?
yeah. I think the number one thing is these other religions, especially starting with Hinduism, has broadened and deepened my understanding of the divine mystery and of divine presence and of selfhood as well. So
Mm.
this understanding that I'm more than my body, I'm more than my mind, um, that's something is that you learn not only from Hinduism but also Buddhism to go within to discover that special presence of something greater than the world um, when you do meditation, for example. So for me, getting to be more specific, to be more concrete, when I was living in India, one of the first places I lived was at what is called an ashram, which is like a monastic community. And this was Anglican, I should say Catholic and Anglican sisters living together in a place that Gandhi himself had often visited up until his death in the 1940s. And it was still around when I was there for the first time in 1984. And one of the things that the sisters told me, because they knew me well enough to know what I really needed, they noticed that I talk too fast, my mind wanders a lot, and they say, well, Bradley, what you need to do is you need to take a Buddhist Vipassana course. Well, I didn't know what that meant at all, so and they said, and I said, why on earth should I study Buddhist Vipassana meditation? Why should I do it? And the sister said, well, all of us here have done Buddhist Vipassana meditation under Goenkaji. Was a well-known man who died about 10 or 15 years ago. And I said, okay, so what about it? Why is that important? And then they said, because it changed our life. Practicing Buddhist meditation for a 10-day course changed our life. You need to do that course. So this is not about Hinduism. This is about Buddhist meditation. But the interesting thing here also is that uh, Buddhist meditation and Vipassana meditation in its Vipassana form starts with breath observation. And breath observation is very key to many meditation uh, practices in Hinduism as well. And the understanding is that if you can focus on your breath, inhalation, exhalation, with complete concentration, you will gradually empty your mind. And hopefully, what will happen is that you start to awaken to a deeper dimension within yourself that you've heard about, but you've never really tasted before. And it's a kind of a it's kind of a entering into an inner desert where everything is unfamiliar, you feel vulnerable. The ego's not really doing a whole lot now except trying to defend itself and survive in the midst of all this striving for silence. And you start to recognize that there's a lot of work that has to be done in terms of transforming and purifying the mind. You know, in Buddhism, regardless of whether it's Mahayana Buddhism involving prayer to bodhisattvas, or whether it's more simpler Theravada traditions without any talk of grace or prayer, it's all finally about purifying the mind to attain heightened compassion and deeper wisdom, liberation from the lower self. And so that's why the sisters recommended very strongly that I do the course. So when you do the course, I'll just give you a brief little summary of it, is that when you do a 10-day course, they don't tell you what's coming. They just you have to write ahead that you're coming, and then if there's a place available, they let you in. And then for 10 days, what you're doing is you are meditating 13 hours a day. The longest stretch is 4 hours. And during the whole time that you're there, during the 10-day course, again, this is in India, these places that practice Vipassana in the Goenkaji system are found all over the world. When you're doing this for 10 days, you're not speaking at all. The only time you speak is when the teacher calls you forward in the hall, along with a few other people, and he asks one question: do you have any questions about meditation? And if you don't, you simply go back to where you were, and you continue to practice meditation under his guidance. He'll give you certain things that you should be doing. And what I found was that I had no questions that were not already being solved by meditation practice about what to do. He was a very good teacher, Goenkaji. And during the time that you're there also, I should add, you don't have eye contact with anybody else either, only with the teacher. So this is what they call a fasting of the mind, fasting of the senses as much as possible. Try to train your mind to be focused on the breath for 3 days, the inhalation and exhalation of breath, followed by the next 7 days of observing skin sensations. Now, this sounds very strange for someone who's never heard about this or learned about Buddhism before, but the whole idea is if you can simply learn to observe your breath without resisting that practice, without getting bored and turning away, if you can observe the skin sensations, whether it's a tingling or an itch, without judging the experience, like this is pleasant or this is unpleasant, you will gradually find yourself more and more detached and less ego-centered in all that you do in the rest of your life. So this is a training of the mind that makes possible a more detached way of living in life as a whole. I'm not sure if I said that very clearly, but that's the best I can do right now.
No, that's beautiful. I mean, Vipassana is something I'm like longing to eventually do. I mean, I've out here in California, there's lots of opportunities, at least, relatively speaking. And I know it could be transformative. Could I ask you what your practice is now? Like, do you constantly or try
No.
to
No.
kind of sharpen that saw, or
No.
how do you do that?
Well, once you pick up the method, you can apply it anytime that you want. And
Right.
I do still do it, but I don't do like long periods of time of meditation. If I find that I don't feel centered, I can focus on my breath, or I can just be aware of what I need to do in other ways to settle down, sink deep within myself. But quite frankly, nowadays it's prayer. It isn't so much meditation as it is prayer. My understanding of the relation between the two of them is that meditation cannot take the place of prayer for a Christian, at least not for me, but it can be a help to prayer. Meditation can help you sink deep within yourself, and then when you turn to prayer from that point, you can pray from a pure and more from a deeper place within yourself. So the prayer pure, less cluttered with different ideas, less thoughts. We actually practice this at Notre Dame in my world religions class. We do it for a couple of weeks, for a few minutes every class period, for about 2 weeks. And I remember one time a student came to me and he said, hey, I wonder if I'm doing something wrong here because I start to I start to sink deep in my meditation and then I find myself praying. And I said, well, I'm not going to stop you from doing that. That sounds like a really good idea. If you're praying from a deeper place than usual, then do it. But the fact is, they would tell you in the Vipassana course, do not pray at all. Just give this method a chance to prove itself to you. In fact, when I first signed up for the meditation course and checked in, the young man who took my passport and all these other identification papers I had and whatever money I had, they put it all away till the course is over. He asked me one question: do you believe in God? And I said, yes, I do. And he says, do not pray for 10 days. I said, okay. So I thought, if God is truth and providence has led me here, then as counterintuitive as it seems, I will not pray for 10 days. I will give Vipassana meditation a chance to prove itself. So that's what I basically did. And it was really life changing. It heightened my awareness of who I am, heightened my awareness of the world around me. I think it even increased my compassion for others. Although I'm supposed to be a compassionate Christian anyway, this course, I think, made me even more attentive to the people around me, living the present moment more than I had been before, not letting my mind wander as much, you know?
Yeah, that's beautiful. Was there a tradition of using mantra or no?
I've never used it.
Okay.
I was hoping that question would not come up because
No.
I know so little about it. There are a lot of good books on this. Harold Coward,
Mm.
Protestant. Do you know the name Harold Coward?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, he wrote a book on this that's
Mhm.
quite well known on mantra.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've
Yeah.
never practiced mantra. Uh, the closest thing I've done to a mantra would be the Jesus prayer.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
I've done that for some time. I did that when I was living in the monastery in New Mexico for a while.
Yeah.
I've been to Mount Athos, by the way, but that's
Oh,
another.
wow. Yeah. Well, wait, tell us about that, because that's like a
Well,
whole collection of monasteries, right?
yeah. They're mostly Greek, but there are also other nationalities. There's a Russian monastery there. There's a Croatian and a Serbian one, a Romanian as well. And
Hmm.
what happened there? This is again where I believe very strongly in divine providence. I'd always wanted to go to Mount Athos. And for those who don't know, this is a peninsula in Greece, which has been practicing Eastern Orthodox spirituality for hundreds of years, with the focus on, especially not just on liturgy, but also on the Jesus prayer over and over again. Well, what happened was I was a student in Tübingen, and I had some good Protestant friends as well as Catholic friends. And one of them said to me, hey, I have connections to Mount Athos. I'm going to go in a couple of months. Would you like to join me? I couldn't believe it because I knew how hard it was to be able to go there if you're not Orthodox. I don't know how he pulled it off. So I went there and I was stunned by the holiness of the faces of the monks that I encountered there. There really is tremendous holiness, quite tangible when you go there. Um, it's hard to explain just how powerful the experience is of of the terrain, for example, of the of Mount Athos. It's very rugged landscape, uh, very heavily wooded, and we got lost. Our first day there, we had to break into a cabin. It's a long story. We had to break into a cabin to find a place for the night that the workers had lived previously. And I had a sense of the solitude and the silence, uh, the utter pristine nature of what it must have been like to come here before any monasteries were started and to maybe start the first one, how they needed to trust in God to be able to build a monastery out in the middle of nowhere. And that spirit of gratitude to God, of praise of God, silence of God, that's still very, very powerful even today. I had some wonderful conversations also with some of the monks there who spoke good English, and that was very helpful as well. I want to tell a real quick story too. One of the things about Mount Athos is that if you're not Greek, if you're not Orthodox, they kind of feel sorry for you. And they say Orthodox, and I say no, Catholicos. And then they go, but then I met one person who told me, he said he was a Canadian. He says a friend of his got lost on Mount Athos sometime earlier, and he ended up at a hermitage. An old monk was living there who spoke English, and he says, Father, I need to find a place for the night because I just got lost. And the monk says, well, you can stay here, of course, stay as long as you'd like. He said, but Father, I'm not Orthodox. And this monk says, this hermit says, Orthodox, Protestant, Catholic, it makes no difference. God is love. That was a simple message, you know. So that's something that I'm discovering also in other religions as well, about the love of God. It's very powerful also in Hinduism too. Very often when people think of Hinduism, especially if they're Christian, very often they think negatively about polytheism and idolatry and all of that. They don't understand that there's a long mystical tradition of two major types. One of them has to do with meditation, and the other one has to do with prayer. And they can tell you all about the love of God. Many of these Hindus, you know, long traditions that are there.
Let's just jump into the real controversial one. All right. So how do you navigate with reincarnation,
Okay.
and how does that look compared to, say, a Catholic anthropological worldview, or however you want to kind of frame it? Like,
Usually when Christians write about reincarnation, uh, they tell you all that's incompatible with Christian teaching. And I'm with them on that. But I want us to also recognize what are the strengths of the arguments in favor of reincarnation, theologically speaking, as well. So anyway, so reincarnation has always been rejected by Christianity, except for maybe some individual thinkers and maybe some fringe movements, because it is incompatible with the understanding of the uniqueness and dignity of every individual human being created by God. That person, as this unique composite of body and soul, is called into life with God, communion with God, resurrection even. And what reincarnation emphasizes is the soul escaping the body multiple times to move on its journey to God. It moves on from life to life, body to body, sometimes even into animal bodies, even plant bodies, until the final goal is reached. When the final goal is reached, it's nothing like the Christian goal, except that there's this oneness with the divine. But there's no affirmation of that life form of being a human being. You're called to transcend your humanness, not to transform it. Let God transform it and integrate it into the divine life. So you leave behind the body, you leave behind the many persons that you've been in history, and you find this changeless reality within that is truly who you are, but it's not really human, finally speaking. And so there's strong arguments in favor of reincarnation in terms of the logic of believing in it from the Hindu point of view. But ultimately speaking, it does not measure up to the Christian hope that God's love will rescue me as this individual human being and bring me home to God in a purified form. I'm still a human being at the end, but now I'm transformed. I'm more Christ-like, hopefully, you see. In Hinduism, that's not so important with regard to reincarnation. Reincarnation offers a lot of answers to questions about why is there inequality of various kinds in the human race. And it all goes back to what we've done in previous life or lifetimes. So it answers those kinds of questions. Problem of evil is solved here. You're getting what you deserve always because of your past karma. So a lot of the questions that are problematic for Christians and Muslims about the problem of evil and the justice of God or the injustice of God are easily answered in reincarnation. You get what you deserve. You're suffering now because of what you've done in previous lifetimes. And so the universe is giving this to you, or maybe God is giving this to you. It all depends on your theology. So again, that's really one of the major differences between Christianity and, on the other hand, Hinduism and Buddhism about the the place of reincarnation or the impossibility of reincarnation.
Hmm.
One person that it's written also much about this is Paul Williams. I don't know if you know the name Paul Williams.
Yes. Hmm.
He wrote a book about his conversion to Catholicism from Buddhism. You know, he's a leading scholar of Buddhism and a practicing Buddhist. And he basically said this: Christianity is the religion of the infinite value of the person. And he meant the human person. And so this is really at the heart of biblical revelation, not just Christian revelation, is the God's love for the individual human being,
Hmm.
that kind of thing. And that's something less than you'll find in reincarnation metaphysics, the value of the human person. Now, I'm not saying, I don't want to be misunderstood to be saying that Hindus don't have a regard for other human beings. They don't value, they do. One reason they value other human beings is because that's the natural tendency of people, is to have this compassion toward others. Another thing about why being a human being is so valued in Hinduism also is because it's only as a human being that you can attain enlightenment or the final liberation. So you might have been something less than a human being in a previous lifetime, but once you've attained the level of a human life and human awareness, then you can actively work toward your spiritual liberation with your free will and the practice of morality and your prayer and your meditation. So it's a good place to be. Congratulations to everybody who is a human being, because now they're closer to liberation if they want to work toward it, you see.
Hmm.
But anything other than human beings, they cannot attain liberation.
Hmm.
Yeah. So there's that. There's reincarnation. There's the expanded awareness of divine presence, the divine mystery, different kinds of theologies that are useful in thinking about the mystery of God. I'm not sure what I would want to add here. There's just a lot of things that come to my mind.
There does seem to be something about reincarnation that would somehow lend itself to helping us to understand maybe more about the interconnectivity of all things as well too. I mean, we could probably look at it in through that lens. We can maybe even look at some form of reincarnation that happens within oneself throughout one's spiritual journey or practice of detachment. I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming there's different ways you can kind of find a place to talk about this in a way where it's not just like a hard separation.
Separation of what?
A separation of theology, let's just say, like a hard separation of different anthropological understanding or even metaphysical type of understanding of the two theories of say the infinite worth of the person, which is soul, and then this idea that the soul is constantly improving from life to life, through reincarnation
So
or with that hope,
yeah, there's a commonality there, that we're all on this journey and we see changes in ourselves, et cetera, et cetera. But I think one of the things that reincarnation also does is it makes us more aware of other life forms. Because if you believe in reincarnation, you realize that might have been your life form at one time, or maybe it will be in the future again if you go in the wrong direction. So there's this sense of the interconnectivity of all life forms, which is affirmed by reincarnation teaching. But, you know, Hindu theologians today, they don't emphasize that so much. They emphasize the strength of reincarnation as answering problematic issues having to do with evil and suffering. Again, like I already mentioned once before. So what you're saying is true, but that's not where the emphasis has been.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. So it's really kind of trying to solve the problem of evil,
Yeah,
maybe. Yeah.
yeah. And also, one of the things that I learned some years ago, I was invited to give a talk um, on why Christianity has tended to reject reincarnation over the centuries. Because Hindus heard about it, but they didn't know if it was true or what the reason for that was, right? So I gave a talk in front of about 100 Hindu thinkers, most of them professors at the American Academy of Religion. And of course, they didn't buy it at all. They said, well, that's all pretty shallow still, this Christian rejection. You're not really taking it seriously, et cetera, et cetera. Other ones, though, they were more positive. They say, oh, yeah, that was, it's understandable why Christians reject this. But then they said something else among themselves. I was overhearing them having their conversations, is that they believe very strongly that there's evidence for reincarnation. And they'll say, did you read this book? Did you hear about this video clip about so-and-so and the things that they could not have otherwise known if not for reincarnation?
Mm.
This is very important for them to find empirical evidence in favor of reincarnation. They're not always interested in the theological arguments. They are, but not so much sometimes as they are in the evidence in favor of reincarnation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what probably makes people open to it in the first place, is because of lived experience. But yeah.
This kind of stuff is so interesting to me, that the fact that, so many world religions have, they may not call it canonization, but they have saints. They have, you were even mentioning before that we have to start taking seriously the aspect of God's revelation when it comes to divinely inspired scripture, or whatever the sacred text might be called. And just, how do, it's just a fascinating question. Obviously there may be differences in moral systems that of course the Catholic Church is never going to canonize a Hindu or something like that, right? Like that's even to say it sounds silly, but I don't think it is silly, because there's virtuous living that I feel like various religions just won't acknowledge from one another, even though they're so much more similar than they are different when it comes to what the good life is, what virtuous, moral, upright living looks like, and all those kinds of things.
Yeah. That's the thing I think probably surprised me the most in my journey, is to see the quality of holiness, not just goodness and virtue, but real holiness that you find among members of other religions. I'm not saying how widespread it is, because I can't possibly know. Even in my own religion, I don't know how widespread it is, but it seems like it's pretty widespread. But the things that we call holy, the qualities, not being non-judgmental, having compassion toward other people, a sense of being rooted in the divine. There's so many things that I see that are characteristic of holiness in Christianity that I find in other religions as well. And holiness is only possible through the Spirit of God. So if I find those traits in other religions, I can't help but draw the conclusion that God is at work in those religions as well, in the lives of those people.
Right.
So it's kind of a pleasant surprise to see that. My first real encounter with that, of holiness in another religion, was when I left the monastery in New Mexico after I'd been there a year. I went to St. John's University in Minnesota, studied philosophy for a couple of years. But during that time, I met a holy man named Usherbud Arya, who became eventually Swami Veda after he became a monk, became a very famous spiritual guide. I was so impressed by his holiness, by his calm, by his graciousness and compassion, his ability to listen closely to people around him during conversations. He was just very attentive and giving. And and this is before I did any theology, so I thought to myself, well, how is this possible? He's not a Christian, but he has all these qualities that I want to have as well. So when you actually meet somebody and don't just hear about something from a book, but actually encounter the living presence of someone who's holy from another religion, it changes everything. Can I tell a real quick story also about Islam?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is in India now. I married my wife was raised a Muslim, and got married in India, and she converted to Catholicism. One of the things she said we have to do is we have to go visit a particular pilgrimage site in Maharashtra, which is the state in which the city of Pune is located. And she said this is where a famous saint lived many years ago, Haji Ali Dargah. Haji Ali, and the name of the place is Haji Ali Dargah. And I said, well, what's there? She says, well, you're going to see the raising of the stone. I said, what's that? She says, you'll see. So we went there. I even took my students there from Notre Dame one time. And there's this shrine for a Muslim saint who died very young, 800 years ago. And before he died, this seems very strange, I'm sure, to listeners. Before he died, he pointed to a particular stone, almost like a boulder, and he said that when after I'm gone, uh, through the power of God, but you'll be invoking my name, but it's really the power of God. You have 11, 11 men surrounding that stone. Each of them puts a forefinger under the stone and call out my name, but it's really the power of God. Then you'll be able to lift that stone high in the air. So, I saw this myself, and then I did it myself as well. I was with all these other Muslims, and they called out the name of Haji Ali, and it didn't work. And one of the Muslims, an older Muslim man, said, "You did not call in the name of the saint." I said, "She's right. I didn't do it. I forgot to do it. I was so focused on the stone, I never thought about the saint at all." So I put my finger under there again with the other men around me, and I called out the name of the saint, and the stone lifted right above our heads until we no longer could call out the name of the saint. And then the stone dropped to the ground. And the message was that God's love is for everyone, and the power of God is greater than any other earthly power. So you should be willing to call on God in different ways in your prayers. This is just a sign of the divine presence and the divine power. So I was kind of floored by the whole thing. Like I said, even my students were there to see this happen, you know. So
Yeah, it's so cool that you decided to tell that story, because that's where I wanted to go, is miracles, which have to be, there are documented miracles in so many faith traditions,
yes,
but they never seem to cross faith tradition boundaries. Catholics hear about the Catholic miracles, and Hindus hear about the Hindu miracles. So, and it's like, we're not allowing God to just be God. We put up these boundaries and boxes, I feel like,
yeah.
and we're not recognizing the Spirit working in all of these different places that it's working, just like you got to experience.
I've had some of my Hindu students uh, write papers about miracles that they themselves have witnessed in the context of the practice of their religion, having to do with certain statues. Anyway, I won't go there now. So, uh, one thing I thought you were going to talk about today, but you didn't end up doing, was about yoga.
Yeah, no, let's
do it. Let's go.
Why I don't even need to be the host here. You just
I think this is such an important thing. Uh, uh, that when people think of Hinduism, they often think of yoga.
Mm-hmm.
But when they think of yoga, there's a lot of very strong reactions to it, either affirmation or rejection of it. It's a very controversial topic. So I've had people tell me who've never practiced yoga, they said that that's praying to a false god. And I say, well, yoga does not involve prayer at all. It's a spiritual path that starts with moral precepts, goes on to physical exercises or stretches, and then concludes with meditation. It's not about prayer here at all. Okay, well, then they're even less interested because meditation for them is incompatible with Christian practice as well. Okay.
You should meet the Benedictines.
Yeah. That it was a Benedictine monastery I was living in also in New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of the acceptance of yoga, many people are practicing yoga, not necessarily recognizing it as a spiritual path, but more as maybe a physical exercise, or maybe something that brings a certain calm to the mind, which is very, very good. But very often, people in the West who practice yoga are unaware of the moral basis of yoga. There's 8 limbs of yoga. The first one has to do with morality and the way you interact with the world around you and with other people, with self-restraint, for example, you see. So all of this finally is about bringing the mind to silence and subduing the ego. So it isn't just about having an experience of feeling refreshed after doing yoga practice and then doing the shavasana or corpse posture afterwards. There's a lot to be said for it, even if it can never be the whole Christian path, because it does not involve prayer. I said too much in too short of time right now. Is there a follow-up question to this about yoga?
Well, let's with the yoga. I mean, some people criticize yoga because of the positions that they would say that the positions themselves are some type of idolatrous type of act towards something um, that would be inconsistent with, like, say, the Christian understanding of God, or that it'd be, almost trying to push the body to do something that is kind of like not what it's supposed to do, or something like that, to fall out of the realms of what is human. And
Yeah.
it's kind of, these are just things that are floating out there.
Yeah, I've run into that before also. I think that one of the most common Christian objections to practicing yoga that I've come across is that when you're doing yoga, it's all about you. Your mind is not on God at all. It's all about you and what kind of progress are you making with the postures or the asanas. And God is not important at all in the system. But the thing is that over time, God enters into the yoga practice, but it's not, God is the creator, but it's not really an active God or a God of mercy or compassion. Not that it's the opposite of that. It's just that there's really no talk about that kind of an experience. So yoga is valuable because meditation is valuable
Hmm.
because morality is valuable for the spiritual path.
Hmm.
See,
Hmm.
so but again, the whole point of yoga, which should be for the Christian, is this helping me to purify my mind, to become a
Yeah.
person that turns to prayer in a better way. Am I becoming more compassionate and more selfless as a result of my yoga practice? Because it's a very comprehensive way of treating the human being, both body and soul and mind. See, so
Yeah, I
which
think I find that to be a very limited way of thinking about God, or what a practice of spirituality might be. To say that it must name God. First of all, it's a little presumptuous, right, for us to be able to say, well, this is engaging in the divine or in God, and this isn't.
yeah,
Uh, but also, it limits the person. I mean, I don't know. Like you were saying earlier that these 10-day Vipassana retreats would require you not to pray. And I was like, how is that not prayer? What you're doing in that meditation that whole time, regardless of whether you're saying something. I mean, so shouldn't we be listening in prayer even more than we're speaking
yeah.
something anyway? And isn't that kind of facilitating that? But then also, like, those kinds of people, or that comment, I mean, that's like saying that The Lord of the Rings is not a Christian book, or I would even go so far as to say Interstellar is is a
Yeah.
very Christian movie, regardless of what the director is, trying to communicate.
I would say that there's a real bridge between meditation and prayer, and that we learn to go beyond thinking and learn to sink deep within ourselves. And it's very wholesome, and it can lead to a deep transformation as a result. However, even within Hinduism, there would be many Hindus who are maybe theologians or practitioners of certain sort. They would say this is all well and good, but still prayer is even higher than meditation. They would not discount meditation at all. They would see the value of it, but they don't want us to lose the personal God, a God who can transform us through that kind of love. So love. I don't want to be negative here because I've learned so much from yoga over the years. I've had some really good teachers, but for me, the whole center, the thing that really affirms human life and brings me to my highest happiness is the experience of divine love. And yoga is not about that. It can lead to that if you start with yoga and then you move on to a different kind of Hindu spirituality, you can do that. And we can recognize the value of the yoga that we've done. But yoga by itself is not a devotional or interrelational practice. And yet it can be very, very wholesome to bring your mind to a deep silence and receptiveness to truth. That's certainly true.
Well, I kind of just mentioned it, but we like to end our episodes with a question, which is about listening, which is sort of what this whole season's been based on, and not just listening, but ideally listening without agenda. So I wanted to know, and maybe you've already named a bunch of them, but I guess I'll just ask anyway. How do you cultivate a posture of listening in your life?
I think divine providence comes into play here. I I personally believe that everyone who comes into my life is sent by God. I need to be attentive to what they're doing, what they're saying to me, what I can learn from them. So I have to be attentive to them. I have to be a good listener. I can't be completing their sentences, and I can't be interrupting them like I've been interrupting you guys today, right? So, but yeah, I think if you take that approach, that God is sending you people into your life, how can you not be attentive to them? How can you not be a good listener? I mean, that's the ideal, at least. It doesn't always happen that way, but that's what I think about myself.
That's great.
Beautiful. I'm definitely going to preach on that one. Thank you so much, Brad. This has been a great gift being with you. Wow.
Really great, Brad. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wow. Bradley Malkovsky, what a great storyteller he is. And I'm not sure if anyone else was picking up on this, but listening to Brad reminds me a little of listening to James Finley. If you know that name, he's one of the faculty at the Center for Action and Contemplation and has an amazing podcast called Turning to the Mystics. But somehow Brad's voice, his gentle voice, and some of his cadences just remind me of Finley. And of course, Finley has a huge connection with Thomas Merton, having been in the monastery with him, and Merton having been his spiritual director. So, is that a coincidence that Brad sort of found his way into the church also through Merton? I don't know. Maybe Merton inspires a contemplative tradition that just leads to this gentle voice that is, I don't know. Somehow these voices are just these soothing voices, but somehow also so packed full of insight and reverence. I just eat it up. I love this stuff. Religion to Reality is more than just a podcast. It's also an interfaith monthly gathering. We meet on the first Wednesday of every month, and you're welcome to join. It's free. It's online. It's simple. You can sign up to follow our podcast at our Substack. First of all, it's the religiontoreality.substack.com. And there is where you'll find the sign up for the monthly gathering. We'd love to have you join us. Religion to Reality was created and executive produced by me, Dave Plisky, and is produced and edited by Nick Stropoli and Connor Donnelly. You can find the show notes and other resources at religiontoreality.org and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.